Believe we are operational here. Let's get the show on the road. We will be having some guests knocking along. There we go. It is warm today. Welcome to Evolution Hour. Clickety clack. Typewriter keys. Analog devices. Ancient technology. Typewriters. Analog clocks. Wow. And Troubles in Paradise, the project of researching the sources that creationists use and why they don't mean what they like to think they mean. Welcome to Evolution Hour. And we can shut that little puppy off and we can get a few other little things going. Let me set up I can set up a later share screen for the word processor here and after a little bit. Whoops, where are we? Yep. I managed to download my Patreon thing onto the computer. Can't edit it, but nevertheless, one thing after another. So anyway, welcome to Evolution Hour on our broilingly hot day here in Spokane. Hi! And we have sound and video. Yes, apparently the newer version, whatever update materialized on Restream, allowed the video to come through, which is not what was happening before. So we at least get sound coming directly through. And yes, Lisa, I can see the chat. Yay! The exciting world of chat stuff. So we are operational. Anyway, as usual, we are continuing the interminable saga of replacing Darwin. A not gigantic book compared to over here. Assembling the bibliography and reference base and guiding through the whole process of how anti-evolutionists play up material. This one will be dealing with some more of Nathaniel Jeanson's attempts in a footnote to slip his creationism in through the references, which is what Jackson is here. Hello. Okay, let me get him on the line here. Hello, Jay.
Oh, boy, matey.
It's 97 degrees here in my den. So if I turn into a puddle or burst into flame at any point, that's the reason. Or if a rolling blackout occurs here and we suddenly lose power. That hasn't happened so far, but there have been various places in the Avista area where because of the heat demand, we're 30 degrees above normal temperature here. Although nippy compared to Canada, where they hit 120 degrees in a spot in Canada, and people are going, what? This is not how it's supposed to work here. Lisa says she was chatting online with a scientifically illiterate person who actually thinks death is a valid argument against evolution. Well, I hate to clue them in, but that one is not going to cut it. That may very well relate to them misunderstanding the young earth creationist argument that there was no death before Adam's sinning, and therefore any sign of death is a problem, and or that because evolution requires animals drop dead at some point, in addition to making new ones, that therefore it is anti-biblical. So what the hell can you do? You try to be the best you can dealing with such people. It's a fun thing to deal with. Always come at it from a source methods point of view, is trying to find where they're getting their information from, if anywhere. And as Jackson knows from his own experience, and I know from mine, they don't always have sources. So you can ask about their Lord Shipments. That's over 33 degrees on the understandable scale. Yes, you metrics person, you Celsius. That woo. Anyway, damn hot. The heat wave is starting to break over on the West Coast where I've been for the last week. We did a test run from the episode there last week from Seattle a couple days ago. Then here in Spokane and Seattle are hotter than Phoenix, Las Vegas, Palm Springs. Yeah, no, this is not a good thing. And for a lot of people that don't have air conditioning, a lot of people in Canada don't have air conditioning, we're just kind of muck along. Unfortunately, I've got a basement that I can go and sleep in at night where the temperature drops to a manageable level compared to what's going on upstairs, because the temperature really hasn't gone below 95 upstairs at all, even with pumping air from the basement. Well, enough of the travails. Anyway, let's get back to the fun stuff, roasting creationists. So let me first off get my patrons out of the way here and thank everybody. So what do I got in here? We got our little share screen mode. If I'm slower than usual, it's because it's hot, and I would prefer it to be less hot. So now theoretically you should be able to see our patrons. Isn't that exciting? The wonderful world of technology. And I shall as well read everybody's name off more directly as well, to thank everybody that's helping out with the project. Anybody else that can join with the patrons is much appreciated. Every bit helps. That's old retiree here. I'm not running off of external finances. Anyway, our colleagues, Hendrel, Colton, Eric Rowley, Suresh and Zeshi, our research levels, Travis Adams, Ian Chen, Convert Me, Stephen Early, Eat Meal, James Fitzwater, History Minor, Ralph McFadden, Pelagia, Benjamin Simpson, Speed of Sound, Studio, DM Wing, Assistant Researchers, Command, Cyborg, Doranku, Jelly, Totus Real, Christopher Johnson, and our friend Steve Bauman, Marigale Beddoes, Daniel, Insects Are Cool, The Lavender Lady, Morton Nielsen, Paul the Skeptic, Puffalopagus, Bo, Hobo, Rasmussen, Devin Reeves, Alex Stone, Paul Williams, A Partridge in a Pear Tree, and the legacy patrons that I will continue to thank every bloody time. Jen, Jody, Mike, John, Keith, Andrew, Dyer, Yui, Mona, Brad, Daniel, Johnson, Yanya, Stagel, Sun, Sky, Stone, Ugly German Truths, Everett, and Sewer. You've all made a difference, and I enormously appreciate all the help on that, because Social Security, Patreon, book royalties, that's my income. And so we're working along on that. Anyway, we'll have a little more income when we get to the exciting world, or we can shut down our sharing there. How are you doing in presumably cooler of Louisiana there, Jackson?
I'm alive.
Do you have air conditioning in your apartment there?
Oh, heck yes, we have air
Okay,
conditioning.
then you are several steps ahead of me, and I'm horribly envious. But at any rate, woo! Anyway.
It's hot year-round here, RJ.
That's true. And you have the humidity. We have a dry heat up here in Washington State, but nonetheless, 100 degrees. It was 109 yesterday. Officially, it's 111 in some of the spots, and so it's never been that high. The hottest it's been in my experience up here was 104. Get out the parka, and it's going to be 100 degrees or so for the next week. So everybody's got to keep watering lawns and all that kind of stuff, and avoid the rolling blackouts. So
true.
But Washington State is open for business. The COVID restrictions have been removed. The governor just flew in and gave an announcement down there at the Riverfront Park Pavilion, and so we're now open for business, and everybody can do stuff, except it's so bloody hot. Nobody wants to go out and do stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty hot outside.
Wacky. Anyway, Jeanson is continuing to play this trick of slipping his creationism in through the footnotes. So this installment is, he has, quote, accelerated rates of geologic deposition and erosion, unquote, which leads to a footnote. And what is that? But a pile of Steve Austin on Mount St. Helens. That's it. And old Steve Austin on Mount St. Helens at that. Several of the ones that he was citing are from way back in 84 and 86 and stuff that weren't even in my reference bibliography because they were so bloody old. And I haven't bothered to put them in. Couldn't he have picked something a little more recent, even from within his own frame? So he's no. We have a full links on all that. Some of it's from ICR. Some of it was stuff that he did with the various creation journal stuff. And plus he's got a chapter from the Answers Book 3 that Austin wrote on the why Mount St. Helens is so important. So that one covers the material that we're dealing with in our Answers book work. I also threw in, just for Lagniappe, an old a little pamphlet version at ICR, one of the little impact thingies that's only a few pages long, and it basically makes the same spiel. Here's the extraordinary news bulletin that Austin wants us to carry, and that Jeanson is doing by proxy. And that is, Volcanoes produce pyroclastic flows, which can make layers of stuff that's like tens of meters thick. Really quick. Alert the media. And they can carve out canyons
Indeed.
and the like. And they can send rubble in and so forth and so on. And you know what those volcanoes can't do, and what Mount St. Helens didn't do? Make rock layers, actual hard rock that you could like trip over and make buildings out of. Austin keeps skipping that part, and so does Jeanson. The most he can do in the previous one where he was invoking Baumgartner on accelerated or plate tectonics and catastrophic plate tectonics, he put it up as a prediction of Baumgartner, and then the fulfillment, which didn't really fulfill it, but still coal slab crap and all that we discussed last time. But this time he doesn't even do that. He just simply puts up all of this row of Austin, and then he just says, and for further reading, a bit that I was already aware of that had been filtered through creationist literature, which had to do with Scheiber's work on floccules and flood depositions, normal flood depositions and the like. We alluded to it in volume 1 of The Rocks Were There in relation to this very issue about sedimentation elements. And the fact is that Scheiber's stuff, ongoing work over many years, absolutely fascinating material. This was a dangerous paper, though, for Jeanson to have brought up because it mentions floccules in the title. Boop. The title of the thing is, oh gosh, I do have it right under my nose. But anyway, it's referring to floccules is a fancy little geological world for these little fluffy bits that can occur in deposition. And they can be mistaken for wave ripples and other things. And so the upshot of the work that Scheiber and bunch are doing is how can you differentiate between relatively rapid deposits that can lay down floccules and things that look like they might have been a slower formed beach, but it's not. And it turns out there are analog and details about how things are interbedded that can allow you to differentiate this stuff. And all of that is explained in the various papers, the 2 papers that we put up. And that means that, surprise, surprise, Jenson's misrepresenting the source material again.
RJ, can I make a comment?
Yeah, jump in.
Hi, everyone in the side chat. Yes, I can see your comments.
Woo!
I'm sorry. I apologize, but I can see everything.
Most of the time, the chat windows have worked well. There's been 1 or 2 times, and it may have been just the teething pains of the system where the chat wasn't showing up. But so far, it's been working just fine. The thing we did last week over in Seattle worked just fine in that as well, where I can tell you that the temperature in the Montessori classroom is significantly cooler than here. They have at least some fans going and room air conditioners and stuff over in that side. BJ says mask in public until the pandemic is over, period. Yeah, I made a point of bringing my mask over with me, and when we were going out shopping and various other things to the store and schlepping around, I had the thing where I could pull it out and put it on without any difficulty. It's an easy thing to do, and unless you're a blithering idiot or an inconsiderate slob, what's the difficulty? And unfortunately, there are an awful lot of blithering idiots and inconsiderate slobs running around in there. And they're about to discover that new variant of COVID can be a nuisance if you aren't vaccinated. So get vaccinated. It's free. Bloody hell. They're not charging for it. Go and get the thing. And fortunately, excess ones are being shipped overseas in various other areas. So they don't want any of this stuff to go to waste. But the overall vaccination rate on the planet is only about 10%, which is not good enough. So expect some troubling things to occur in a variety of nations. South Africa's got problems going on, India and various other places, as these variants are flipping all over the place. It was a multi-year process in dealing with the great pandemic in 1918, 1919 too, with much less sophisticated technology. But it shows that even with sophisticated technology, we can have some bloody idiots in here. Anyway, so the upshot of Jenson's manipulated material on the geology part is that Mount St. Helens isn't helping the case for rock. and it doesn't make deserts go away, and it doesn't make ancient ice ages go away, and it doesn't make carefully preserved tracks and burrows that would be obliterated by the big slosh go away. And as well, was it a good idea to bring up pyroclastic ash flows when immediately you can go, wow, there are like ash flows like this all through the geologic record? They're not lumped all in one blob, when presumably the waters of the flood will have been dissipating. You see that if that was the model, then you have the flood, the fountains of the deep, and everything it sloshes and kills off all the critters, conveniently sorting them in peculiar arrangements that seem to match up geologically with the conventional view and don't seem to match up at all with the aerial Roth imaginary environmental layers up in these stage lakes. But that the flood waters will be dissipating, mountains start poking up. Remember, Andrew Snelling is insisting that all the people who try to find Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat can't be right, because Mount Ararat didn't exist until after the Tower of Babel. Got that?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So it's super duper recent, like the Alps and the Rockies and the Himalayas and the Andes. And basically every tall, lumpy mountain is recent. Super duper recent. Unbelievably, implausibly recent. And I'll be seeing whether or not he alludes to much of that along the way. But those are some of the little unpleasant sidebars that are going along there. Part 2 of the show relates to Gavin Cox, who's not a big player in the young Earth creationist field. He pops up just peripherally, but he's one of the newer kids on the block, and maybe he's not going to help him any. Anyway, he had a post from just this year at creation.com where he's riffing off an assortment of papers, and the title is just a glorious one to think about in here. Divine Design Denies Evolution. Bum, bum, bum. And it's, did you know, Jackson, that homology is head over heels?
What?
Yep.
What does that mean,
Evolution.
RJ?
Well, homology refers to similarity in body parts, but a recent study of all sorts of species of flies by scientists from the University of Chicago demonstrates how genes with basic roles in earlier embryo development are able to be quickly chopped and changed without altering a fly's body plan and functions. Their recently published paper in eLife states the following: with very few exceptions, animals have head and tail ends that develop when they are an embryo. The genes involved in specifying these ends vary between species, and even closely related animals may use different genes for the same roles.
Whoa.
And that's the ammunition that he's using for this. Well, fortunately, the paper that he's riffing off of, June 2019 on moth embryos, you can look at it yourself to find out whether or not it means what he wants it to mean. And then he goes all gee whiz towards the end about the jumping mechanisms of some beetles and how intricate it is. Ta-da! What he didn't mention was something that the paper he cited mentioned, which was a paper from 2011, which went into the evolution of the jumping mechanism and how the selection pressures were causing anti-predator things to generate this thing convergently in a variety of different species within that bunch. Odd that Cox didn't figure to mention that. It's almost like it's almost like he's avoiding evidence that doesn't match up with his gee whiz model, you think?
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, the other advantage of large pieces of paper is that I can do this to cool myself off a little bit. I'll tell you, here on the riverboat, it has been so as we have been going down the Mississippi towards the hurricanes.
Right.
Yeah. Part 3, you didn't think there was going to be a 2-part show, did you? Yesterday, I stumbled on Atheist Jr. was doing a positively gobsmacking set of interviews with Kent Hovind's ex-spouse and Kent Hovind's ex-partner, helper, employee, Mark Stoney, who have all been dishing the dirt on the delightful, narcissistic, insane world of Kent Hovind. And both of them independently were spotting that hyper-narcissism of Kent Hovind. And that caused me to drop off a link to the 2017 thing that I did just during the early years of the Trump administration, where I was saying that Donald Trump is the Kent Hovind of modern politics, or Kent Hovind is the Donald Trump of creationism, either way. So BJ Reyes broke down the charges against the pedophile. Oh, I haven't seen that newer one. Yeah, that's yes, there's things about pedophiles and drug addiction, of various shady characters that Hovind is kind of coddling. And it's a very peculiar relationship on here. Hey, RJ should be proud. I went to the primary source, the ex-wife. Yes. Oh, hi, Atheist Junior. Yes, you are the one in here. Goodness gravy. Yes. Yeah, that's the exact primary source. And I complimented you on the fact that what you're doing here is a very useful service on this. Because remember, Kent Hovind is a pathological information distorter and bullshit artist, just like Donald Trump. If you want to do the only difference between the two is Kent Hovind is running off a world where he's only got thousands of dollars to grift off of his various people, including his wife, Cindy, who he exploited shamelessly. Whereas Donald Trump inherited hundreds of millions of dollars and grifted billions of dollars of loans. So he operates at a higher level. But if you want to know what Kent Hovind would be like as president of the United States, or what Donald Trump would be like running a dinosaur theme park for creationism, you could just interchange the two, because they're temperamentally ridiculously similar in nature. Hyper-narcissistic. They can never be wrong. They can never admit to being wrong. They can be peripherally charming in the lead you into temptation phase, and then vicious as all get out when they dump on you later on. So it was a very chilling Atheist Junior. The small loan of $1 million. Actually, I think in Trump's case, it was $10 million, just pocket change. You know, it's that he initially downplayed all of that stuff. But I love particularly the points that you brought up in there, Atheist, about Stoney's noting, and you were noting about the fact that Kent keeps this constant construction project stuff going. And it as a cult, he keeps everybody exhausted. It's always one new thing, one new thing, one new thing. And so the only person that can kind of relax a little is the cult leader off in the mansion. So Kent, we'll find out. Pity. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago the fact that I know this is going to be a shocker to everybody, but Kent lost his $500 million lawsuit for wrongful conviction. It's snagged up. Let's see. How could I summarize what the courts were saying about it? This is stupid. That's pretty much what the courts were saying about that. It's like, what? You're wasting our time. Go away, kid. Lisa says, I'd just like to have $10 million. Yeah. I mean, what many of us could do with all those little extra zeros. I've been kind of bumping along in the last few bits after income tax, because I have paid more income tax this year than Jeff Bezos, and only about half as much so far as Donald Trump did in 2017. So I'm kind of in that limbo land between one billionaire and another sort of billionaire as to the tax thing. And that's what shows you when you can have people who enable you writing the tax code. Thank you, Paul Ryan 2017 tax bill. It doesn't help people in my neck of the woods all that much. Anyway, so I'll be putting the links up to those two videos that Atheist Junior has done, in addition to the things that I did, the one I did in 2017 on it, and that we'll be alluding to it along the way, because I have come at Hovind purely from a science methods approach. So the fact that he's an annoying prick was an intriguing thing, and how he treated his employees was a thing where I'm going, you know, the same thing with Jerry Falwell Jr. and all the little scandals going on with Falwell University or Liberty University. But it was not a primary focus of mine, because even if Kent behaved like a saint, even if Kent behaved with the Christian qualities that Mark Stoney or his ex-wife were displaying, he would still be a scientific illiterate who practices bad method. So I didn't really bother about that aspect of it, but it is a relevant point to think about how. Oh, another point that you brought up in that interview, Atheist, that I thought was really interesting was the fact that Hovind had exploited his first wife in exactly that way, that he was using her as the shill on the checks to track that money in to avoid the structuring clause. And so he to some extent, apparently, even Donald Trump doesn't go to quite that level. He leaves kind of Melania and the kids over in a corner and makes use of a different set of people to play shuffleboard with the finances. And we'll find out what, now that they're starting to indict the Trump company for tax evasion. What an exciting world we live in. Yeah, it's, I think it's a fair thing to say. It's always a matter of time that these religious charlatans show their true colors. Bad method is hard to conceal indefinitely unless you can suppress information. So if you live in an environment where you're running the government, you can suppress information. If you're running a thing where, like, you're the king or the head of the state, like Kim Jong-un of North Korea, then where, by the way, according to the North Korean regime, there aren't any COVID cases at all. None.
Yep, not a single one.
Not a single one. We can believe that. Sure.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of that stuff will be dealing with the more political and cultural aspects of bad method that Jackson and I will be working on in a subsequent work. They're all in on it. The analysis of the conspiracy thinking mind and how that relates to various issues, and kind of a double taxonomy of how stupid is it empirically versus how dangerous is it empirically. And so flat Earth is at the Mount Olympus of stupid, but it's comparatively trivial. Whereas there's a lot of circumstantial arguments that can be used to have aspects of anti-vaxxer stuff. But in terms of its practical danger, it shoots off the index. It's terribly dangerous. Even though there are little bits and snippets of it that can kind of bump into legitimate issues like the Wuhan lab and whether or not some idiot might have screwed things up and released a thing that they shouldn't have, which wouldn't, it's not impossible.
Although, in fairness, in the United States, we've released anthrax multiple times by accident. So
you think it's a bright idea to put the Center for Disease Control labs in a metropolitan area, Atlanta? Is there something like dumb about that? And that's exactly what they were doing with Wuhan. There's a huge metropolitan area. Well, it's easy to get to. It's a short commute. Yeah. And it's a short commute for the virus if it gets out, too. It goes, thank you for giving us this wonderful population vector. Oh, yummy, yummy.
Right.
So I think, did you ever see the Andromeda Strain, the old science fiction film?
Can't say I have.
You really should. First of all, it's a fabulously good film. Don't bother about the TV remake. That was just drag. But Robert Wise's 1970 film is delicious. And what was neat about it, this is back when Michael Crichton wasn't off the wall in his later years. But the interesting thing was the premise of it was that the military had built a special hyper secure lab out in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, that where they could take any microorganisms that they brought back from space, intentionally or not, to study them in a safe environment, and whether you could always detonate an atomic bomb to blow the place to smithereens in case things got really bad. And it's called the Wildfire Complex. And it's an interesting thing to see where the technology was in 1970, that this was just littered with cutting edge technology about medical computers that you would use touch screens to gain information, to work diagnostics, and all with horribly primitive CRT things and all this stuff. And then all of the bits about the electron microscopes and all of the material an awful lot of the equipment that you saw in the show was actual cutting edge scientific equipment. And so it's a really funky little thing to watch just from that point of view. Plus it's a really neatly done, clever, dramatic story, sharply done. It's got, nice edges to it. It drops you right back in the era of Richard Nixon, even though they don't technically allude to who the president is. That's the period in which it's taking place. And so I strongly recommend, yes, Catch the Andromeda Strain. I haven't read the book, Lisa, but Robert Wise did a really excellent job on it. It has a very avant-garde electronic film score too. And I still remember to how evocative it is. There was this computer thing where they would show when they were trying to computer model the alien virus, the Andromeda strain, and he would just blow the circuits. It just went too far, and suddenly you'll get this 601, 601, 601 error. There's too much data coming in. The computer can't handle it. But anyway, there's the bit. There's an electronic music score element in here where it's going meaning, meaning, meaning. And it just sticks in my head forever. You'll never be able to forget that little from the Andromeda strain. Almost all Canadian cast, and the wonderful Kate Reid. I think she's dead now. Matter of fact, almost everybody in the movie is probably dead now. It's been 50 years ago. But
it was a little while ago, huh?
It's been a while ago, but it's one of my favorite science fiction films. One of the very few films at the time that I went to see more than once. Because a friend of mine, we were super duper science geeks in that, we were just really impressed by it. And this was 7 to 8 years before Wise did Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and before he did the Hindenburg movie and a whole bunch of other things. And this was just 5 years after he did The Sound of Music. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of structural forms there. But anyway, a side bit on the Andromeda strain, but the idea of whether or not we really will probably have to pay much more attention to locating specialized labs. Remember, what we're going through here is a dry run, because this is going to happen again, that there's going to be mutant strains of things that in a world in which we travel very quickly can go from a benign, trivial spot on a shrub somewhere in the middle of Nowheresville, and in 24 hours, the infected person has gone through 5 airports and has infected 10,000 people who are all spreading it all over the place. And if it's a virus that may not be symptomatic, it can go before they even notice anything's going on. So keep your masks handy. And as a society, we will all have to deal with that. Everything that we do from now on, we're never going to go back to the old bit of having people crowded in office blocks anymore. There's going to be much more virtual learning, much more usage of Zoom and all the rest, and a lot of transportation and travel. If you don't have to travel, do it electronically. Travel for pleasure, not because you have to do something for another purpose, and let the remote aircraft take the stuff around, the drones and all the rest, and self-driving airplanes and cars and freight machines, which of course is going to make the Teamsters and the truck drivers pissed, as a lot of their activities are now being replaced by machines. But welcome to the 21st century, kids. And it's my job as a futurist who simultaneously lives in history and the future to kind of ponder the implications of stuff. So it would have probably been less catastrophic had the pandemic response team not been shut down by Steve Bannon and Trump early on in the Trump administration. Why? That's just a waste of money, they thought. Nope. And we have to kind of play catch up on all that stuff. And it reminds us we cannot afford to have scientific illiterates in political power. It's dangerous. And we've got it not only in the pandemic issue, but in climate change, which is going to be another topic that will be discussed in their All In On It book. And those things cross-connect in so many intricate ways. Naomi Oreskes, who had done stuff on the oil industry and how they would manipulate the press and all that, that same dynamic continues through to this day in various modes as companies try to avoid the consequences of their actions, or if they can get the state house in favor of them, they can just basically write the rules, which is what happened in Texas, and that's why all their electric power grid went kaput. We over here, even though we've had some difficulties with all this excess heat, the various planners, both on the west and the east side of the state, have really thought through a lot of this in advance. So although we've got some burps at 30 degrees above normal temperature, it's not massively disastrous kind of stuff because they were anticipating a lot of this thing. They're monitoring, in the case of Avista in Spokane, they're monitoring the various transformers to make sure that the load doesn't cause them to burn out. And that's why they would give like an hour, shut the thing off. The local CBS affiliate suddenly went dark for a while, right while I was watching Colbert. Whoop! Presumably up on the hill up in there, they could shut them down at an off hour for a little while, let the thing cool down a little, and then restart. And they've been doing that in a spot basis all over town. And it may hit here. If suddenly I go, boop, you'll know the rolling blackout hit Shadle Park. But we'll see about it. Yeah, there's a good comment there from the Atheist Junior. You know what is scary to think about is if our society had way more anti-vax conspiracy lovers, like 80% of us were, a pandemic would be like the Black Death 2.0. Indeed, because it could. We saw the early stages of it was the fact that even though the thing has a relatively low death rate, it was comparatively easy to catch. And where the problem was is that you could, if it catches fast enough, you have so many people hitting the hospitals that now there's no room for anybody to get emergency aid. All the beds are covered, so they would have to build temporary hospitals. And of course, if you're a police state like the Chinese, you know, they practically assembled like a Lego set 3 or 4 gigantic hospitals in various cities, you know, like lickety split. That's the one upside of being a totalitarian police state with a lot of resources and commands, that they can do some things quickly. I think that's also part of the Chinese notion, you know, the mandate of heaven, that you want to make sure that in times of crisis you pull things off effectively. But then again, they also did a degree of data suppression, where they were making life miserable early on for that guy who was the whistleblower, who was saying, no, wait a minute, there's something going wrong with this COVID thing. That's a serious problem to deal with. So if we had a higher percentage, and that's exactly what happens when my famous word that I will type in there, Tortukan, is the word of choice to describe these sort of mindsets, because it doesn't tell you whether they're bright or stupid. It doesn't say whether they're religious or atheist. It doesn't say whether they're politically left or right. It just says that these are people who have a knack for not thinking about things they don't want to think about, an easy ability to grab on to an object of desire and only look at reinforced material that goes along with it. And if those kinds of minds get into power, shit happens. Shit happens all the time. But reasonable people will respond to them effectively. But if you have too high of a proportion, especially in a culture, we saw this in a horrifying scale with the Nazis, where a culture that had been inculcated with following orders from the top down suddenly have complete nutballs giving the orders. And it spiraled out of control in the matter of a few years, and tens of millions of people died and the entire planet was disrupted. So we can see, in the same similar thing was happening with the Soviet Union, a different set of ideology, but still Tortugan. And we see it today in the various totalitarian theme parks like North Korea, and the dregs of what's going on still in Cuba, which is still an authoritarian communist police state. The basket case down south of them in Venezuela. A variety of areas. You're seeing circumstances fray in a variety of little countries in Africa, a continent that has vast resources, but so much baggage that they have yet to resolve in a way, and some little positive places in them, but at other places, messes. And whither but for the grace of sound method can go just about anybody. So I've been dithering on here for a while, Jackson. What you have anything to add to the monologue?
Buy our book.
Buy our book. What a wonderful way to while away the time when not melting in the heat or worried about a pandemic than a nice, wonderful book explaining the absolute claptrap of the Answers in Genesis group and sundry others. And volume 2, which we are working on, is going to continue that wonderful stuff, because boy, did we have to leave a lot out for the first book.
That's true. We did.
Yeah. And the one area that turned out to be kind of an advantage is that flood geology material was going to be in 2 separate chapters anyway. It just turns out that the other half of it's now in a completely different book. And so the other material we hint at we allude to an awful lot of stuff on the homology issue, and that's going to come up in spades in dealing with the origin of tetrapods and the genetics of that, and the windup of what genes are involved in the production of that, and Tiktaalik and all the various Rhipidistions and that. It's funky, fun stuff, as well as going through how superficially cursory the creationist response on this is. Not only at Answers in Genesis, but also at ICR and creation.com and the Discovery Institute, that it's just a froth. Another one that I was just looking at and taking notes on, dear sweet Erica, whom, by the way, moderated the discussion that Cy Gard.
Oh yes, RJ,
yesterday.
tell us your thoughts on the discussion.
Yeah, I loved it, and it did exactly what we intended to do. Because Cy approached me and said, I'd like to discuss a biogenesis with you. And he's a theistic evolutionist, and I am an evolutionist, non-theistic. And we realized this was not going to be a debate, and it's not about the existence of God, although the subject came up in various contexts. But basically, we're thrashing out the forensics of what was going on. And apart from, standing for truth in his little claque over in the peanut gallery there, trying to stir up trouble, where they couldn't get us going with each other. Erica did a wonderful job segmenting up thing. We had a few speed bumps because the initial feed had that 10-minute timer limit that we had with Zoom.
Yeah.
And so suddenly, poof, we're off the air, and it's about 5 minutes or so. So Erica was mollifying everybody. I don't know whether she was tap dancing or showing off skulls in her back shelves or whatever. But anyway, we got back on and a second one, and that ran all the way through. And we went, a couple hours discussion on the matter. But I think it was quite delightful because we all were discussing, where does Luca fit into things? What kind of there's just oodles of unanswered questions here. And any model of the origin of life and how you finally get to Luca has got to hit the benchmarks of what we know is the case. And it's a fabulously interesting thing. And we were also discussing the whole idea of why he's a scientist and why I love science. It's how interesting it is. You want to know, the scientific mind is like somebody that wants to know how the magic trick is done. And it doesn't diminish the magic trick to know how it's done. If there's some people who don't have that kind of mind, that they can't stand to know how the magic trick is done because it takes all the fun out of it. But that's not going to make a good scientist. And so the very kind of people that would be most annoyed if Penn and Teller explained how it was done will be exactly the sort of people that will be more comfortable to be just told things mystery, like Cox and his beetles and moth genes, rather than wanting to know how the trick is done and seeing how things all worked out. So anyway, I found it quite a delightful discussion on there. Anyway, Erica is doing a little segment on Gaia streaming, which she says is the streaming channel for stupid people. and that is. And they've got a bunch of stuff in there on the Atacama skulls, which are these elongated skulls from Peru that are perfectly the normal skull deformation practices that human beings do weirdly in various cultures, but that the Wu people think is like alien DNA, space alien stuff, not actually humans at all. And also, hold on to your seat on this one, Jackson. According to this same argument, the Denisovans were giants.
No. No.
You seem unconvinced, Mr.
No. Unacceptable.
Yeah, and for one thing, we've starting to get more. They just found a fairly complete skull of a Denisovan, and needless to say, they're not super giant.
Of a maybe Denisovan.
Yeah. And again, they'll be hunting around for the DNA, all that. And serendipitously, in the latest Dapper Dino Kent with Bent episode, it turns out that this was segments where Kent Hovind was just going gangbusters on the giant people thing. And so he was riffing off of the dregs of the dregs, in addition to Ron Wyatt, who we're going to be alluding to in the second volume. For those of you who don't know who Ron Wyatt is, let me type his name in here. You can Google him. He's dead, by the way. He's been dead for, I think he died in 1999, so he's been gone quite a while. But his wife, widow, and his partner have continued to spread the word about Noah's Ark that he found, and the the chariot wheels of the pharaohs drowned.
Oh yeah,
Drowned in the Red Sea, and these Atacama skeletons and all that. He's been accused of outright fraud, in that he was just making up shit for money and he would sell them to creationists. I'm a charitable sort, and thinking that he's just phenomenally bad method. And it's the same thing with Kent Hovind there, where if he is doing it fraudulently, if he was doing it actually fraudulently, then that makes it even more pathetic. But it still won't rescue the argument, even if he wasn't being a direct fraud. But Ron Wyatt is so far down the food chain that relatively few creationists take that stuff seriously. That it doesn't show up. He's looked at with arm's length at all the poobahs at ICR and AIG and all the rest. They're very reluctant to give any credence to this stuff. And then there are active evangelicals who are just as creationist as Kent Hovind is, but are absolutely furious with the Ron Wyatt bunch for fraud and misrepresenting material. So there's just a bunch of critics in-house in the creationist community, independent of all of the skeptics over in the corner, kind of looking like, okay, I'll just eat my popcorn here and watch you kids play. That's kind of how it's worked out on there, because there's been relatively little side material, because the in-house creationists were dumping on Ron Wyatt. And yet, of course, Kent Hovind thought Ron Wyatt was just sweet. This tendril of interconnections, this also links up with the ancient astronaut super civilization people. So one of the people that Kent Hovind was citing is David Hatcher Childress. Does that name ring a bell or not, Jackson?
Say it one more time.
David Hatcher Childress. You're excused for not knowing him. But I'm an old fart who's been watching this thing for years, and he's been a little figure that pops along in the pyramids are built by space aliens crowd, and also connects up with young earth creationism and a whole bunch of other stuff. And he still floats around with the ancient astronaut sets. He's now older now and he's gray haired, but still just as stupid as he was before, and occasionally writes books and all the rest. And so to see Kent Hovind credulously latching on to Childress, there will be some stuff on Childress in volume 2, because that connects up directly with the nutballs around the search for Noah's Ark in the various positions. We'll have a whole listing of the various places where people have thought they have found the Ark over the years.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's a fascinating phenomenon of the psychology, and unlike the stuff that's going on with the Andrew Snelling level and the Nathaniel Jeanson, they're stupidly blockheaded, but they're not fraudulent in the way that this lower echelon is, of just concocting crap out of the middle of nowhere, the little cottage industry of Ica stones and all of that connects up to actual fakery, that they're just too stupid to ever smell a rat on. So they basically saw them coming. And we'll be discussing all of that stuff, all of the sightings of pterodactyls and sea monsters and Malegi Babengi, or whatever the hell it's called. Down in
Makeli Mbembe?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Ian Chan. Hello, Ian. I thank you again for being a patron for the channel. That even though I'm melting here at, oh my God, it's 98 degrees now. The temperature has not dropped at all up on the upper floor of the house. And so if it weren't for the air that I'm pumping up from the basement, that acts like a natural air conditioner down there, it would be yuck. So we're muddling along on here. But I thank you enormously, Ian. And you've been not only helpful for me, but everybody else in the area, Apologia and Erica and all the rest. And one of the most deliciously humorous debates with Kent Hovind that I've ever seen. I have one technique, but no, you gave it a theatrical panache that I doff my hat that I'm not wearing at the moment to you. That was absolutely hilarious, where you had picked up all that. Oh, and someday we all ought to gather together the Kent Hovind Impressionist Club, because Erica does a pretty good Kent Hovind. Josh Bowen is spectacularly good with his Kent Hovind impression. And so it'd be like having a gathering of Christopher Walken impressionists. We could have a gathering of Kent Hovind impressionists into the ultimate creationist video with all of the Kent
These
Hovind.
This is true. We would just have to get Josh Bowen for that.
Yeah, God, he has the cadence, everything down absolutely perfectly. When you shut your eyes and just listen to him, he has him perfect. And there are others that do it fairly well, but no, he's absolutely hilarious on there. And then all you have to do is to construct all the content and all of that. That there are a series of tropes, but we didn't deal with the kind of sordid undercarriage of creationism and its relationship so much. We alluded to a little bit of it in volume 1, in the Paluxy River tracks and that sort of stuff, which we'll be alluding to again in the second book, because there's way more to this subculture than just the Paluxy tracks, and figures in there that keep playing a role. Karl Baugh, my God, is that guy going to live to be 100? I don't know. But he and the various ones connected up to him, Kent Hovind and others, cross-fertilize each other. And then, of course, you have the Nephilim Freeze and others kind of floating along, picking up stray factors of these things, so that, there's a guy, Christopher Jeanson, whose website keeps filtering a lot of this material in, and I'm pretty confident that Kent Hovind has cribbed some stuff off of that website, because there's some very specific oddball things that haven't occurred in other spots. It's always fun to play hunt up the source to try to figure out where somebody is getting some oddball bit, or is it possible that they actually have come up with an original stupid idea as opposed to copying somebody else's stupid idea? So there we go. So I think we covered all of our little blips along in here. And I'll strongly recommend to Ian that keep going with the thing on doing in that same format, and even in a non-debate context. The humor and the props and the background information is an excellent way of bringing things home. Humor is extremely good. Erica does that just beautifully. She did a little snippet of kind of like the condensed version of the ancient civilizations argument, and the talking heads that are quoted out of context and the editing. I mean, it's just a beautifully concise parody of just exactly how that kind of mindset dangles could it be? What if? All of these, conditional things where, no, you need the evidence for them. So because human evolution is going to be a whole chapter in there, and in the new book are giant Denisovans and Atacama skull people and all the rest. Some postings that I just tumbled onto from Joel Duff. He did quite an extensive analysis of the creationists on Homo naledi, and how there's a divide as to whether they regard that some of the Homo naledi they think are humans and others are apes. And the fly in the ointment is the fact that there are tools associated. That if it weren't for all of that stuff, they could probably easily attribute them all to apes, just based on what morphology, hair splitting they do. But because of all of those tools, they're having a little bit of trouble on it. Plus, he's just been doing a new series. He's only into the first 2, but I think he's going to do 2 more postings. Now, this is naturalist historian guy, where he's detecting what we have also spotted is that there's a new breed of creationists coming along that's changing the dogmas, that's doing the hyperspeciation and all the plate tectonics material. And so he's identifying what those systematics are, and he's going to be going into more details in the next couple of posts. And Robert Byers, our bête noire of stupid, jumped in at one point saying, no, you have no right to do that. Only creationists can decide what creationists are. Sorry, everybody gets to play, Robert. I'm terribly sorry about that. Let's since we can actually get sound going, let's cue up our shameless plug commercial, and for the Rocks Were There book. And let me see. I got to get this opened up. And, boop. There we go. And I got to put that down so it's not full. And then I got to go back over here. And then I got to go share screen. And then I got to go to the window. And then I got to go to there. And I got to go to hit share. And I have to explain it to everybody because I'm an idiot. Okay. And away we go. So we get to Tell the Rocks Were There. Volume 1. Have you encountered it? Have you bought it? Have you got it for a giant doorstop? straight science answers to bent creationist questions. That Jackson, bless his heart, suggested that we do a breakdown of the various answers book that he had already begun on his own. And they've shot off their mouth so extensively that we just can't resist putting in our 18 cents for it. So this will be a wonderful resource for anybody that wants to get caught up to speed on modern anti-evolutionism, and especially the current breed of young Earth creationists. The rocks are there, packed with facts and references. We mean it. We are very, 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 very proud of the works we've done so far here, and we fully intend to be doing just as well on Volume 2. The range of things, of information, just when you think a creationist can't get any stupider, yeah, they can. And also, we've got so much more information that continues to come downstream relative to the geology, relative to the genetics, the human origins, and the spread of human beings and their cultures around the world and all of that. It's lots of stuff, even down to information on the domestication of animals and crops that don't fit the creationist model, natural evolution adaptations, the variety of ones, that, because both Tibetans and Andeans have been studied in terms of not merely humans, but various animals that live at high altitudes, how the natural variations and mutations responsible for adaptation to low oxygen, high altitude life have occurred, and occurred in comparatively recent period because they've only been living there few thousand years, and all of that moves on. So lots and lots of stuff to do. And Elisa Patricia says, I like Erica, so do we. Now that I don't have cable anymore, I'm just on the local broadcast channels. I don't even have the option to inflict old episodes of Ancient Astronauts. I'm sure what I did when I did have cable, and I would look at these things, and I probably have been, yipes, a good 10 years or more since I've actually seen an episode. Once in a while, something would come up where they were talking about a topic that I thought, yeah, I kind of like to see how they deal with it, like pyramids and Mesoamerican pyramids, and that I'm intrigued with because they muddle that one a lot. Anybody that wants to use those shows from a source methods point of view can do so. You have to be careful about how you would be doing excerpts and stuff because, you know, the copyright police and all that crap, but you can still discuss them in video analysis, which is to look into what the claim is, where they're getting information from, do they actually show you? If they have talking heads, who are the talking heads? If they're regularly accredited scientists, are they being selectively quoted? And just as Erica noted in her little parody of this kind of style, to where they just nick off at the point where it's really kind of get interesting. So that means you could look at what their published material is. The goal I try to do as much as possible in source methods is to ground it in regular academic technical literature. So if you can find out that, now you're attaching the issue to the cutting edge of the science research, and it would be the same for archaeology or any other discipline. And since more and more of the information is directly accessible, and if there's something that you need to find, look on the contact email of the technical paper and email them. And $9 to a hole in a donut, they will be perfectly happy to send you a PDF of the work, even if it's not available otherwise. And so in the world that we have today, information, we can get that primary source material, and that puts you ahead of the ancient astronaut person or the wooist of any type, because you're now looking at the source data field, and they're floating around in ideology manipulation land. And then you can see the processes whereby they avoid landing on that data field. And absolutely any topic can be approached from that direction, as we will be showing in, as I was starting to show in Evolution Slam Dunk on the reptile-mammal transition, and then as Jackson and I did cooperatively for The Rocks Were There and with Volume 2 and the subsequent books. There's no shortage of grist for the mill. So everybody get involved. It's fun. You learn stuff. You can annoy some people that need annoying. That's another ancillary benefit of it. There are people that need to have their pretensions poked, they'll probably not notice it. I mean, nothing is going to deflate Matt Powell, I don't think. He'll just plow on. And the same thing with Kent Hovind and others. You know, these are not people who, in the whole, go ahead, Jackson.
Well, he won't talk to me again, so I guess I kind of deflated his sales.
Yeah.
But you know, RJ, the whole bit recently, I don't know if you keep track of it, with Steven Crowder got ambushed by Sam Cedar after avoiding debating him for like months, and now Crowder is taking a month off of his show as a result. So, you know, even the most you know, inflated people can be deflated a little bit sometimes.
Well, and here is the matter of death of a thousand cuts approach, is that if the person that is the wooist is approaching this on their terms, and somebody comes in and they haven't studied much, T-Jump comes to mind as the archetypal example there, where they just trot out a generic argument and they're not really well versed at it, then that person can do quite well, and they enjoy that. Kent Hovind has always had a happy time coming in and jousting with the dragons. But the problem is, and it's certainly gotten worse for him over the last 5 years or more, is that more and more people, the late Bill Hudlow and me and you and Erica and Dan Stern Cardinale, all these different people who are focusing on specialized areas of interest and making use of source methods to find out what does your opponent construct their argument with, where are they intersecting or not onto the data field, how can you deploy the data field in ways that will reveal that they have their head stuck up their ass. And that is a technique that is exasperating for somebody that's used to dealing with the relatively uninformed critic, that somebody that knows their argument better than they do, and the argument that they don't know clearly better than they do, and knows how to deploy them with a degree of improvisational theater that makes it smooth. Because everybody will find some spot. If you're dealing with somebody like Nephilim Free, you get this vomit of new stuff. And he has such a range of material, presumably in video files and stuff that he has in whatever he has on his computer, that he can dump a variety of stuff. Other ones are much more constrained and predictable, to where you kind of can see where Sal Cordova or somebody or Otangelo is going to end up fairly quickly. And in Kent Hovind, in that is actually comparatively predictable. So anybody that goes into somebody that has a paper trail, anybody that wanted to debate me, I've been on YouTube now for quite a few years. You'd think that you'd be able to get my gist of what I do. And so anybody that was coming at this like, why, I didn't know that RJ does like source things, who'd have thunk? So you want to find out what the structure is of their argument and deal with it and come at it from an area that you like. You're at the greatest disadvantage if you have to approach a topic that you're not personally invested in. But everybody probably is invested in something. You, Jackson, have a biological end of things, and there are layers of the things that you just have right at your fingertips. I have certain interest in dinosaurs and in history and other areas, and people have seen me when I was having that discussion with gosh, what's his name, the Noah's Ark guy, Williams something, that Otangelo was the potted plant on, and the guy made the mistake of bringing up the Harappa culture in India. And that was just a perfect little opening for me to deploy some information that I knew completely about and suddenly get him head scratching and making up shit, think that the ice age at the tip of South India was Pleistocene. No. And he was just basically riffing off of it. And if you have, for any creationist, if you've got not 5, but 10 or 15 people, all potentially gunning for them with source methods, each one coming at it with a specialized toolkit and knowing how to deploy that toolkit, It means that they're constantly being assailed by people that are ahead of them. That can't be comfortable. Can't be comfortable. And that's the goal of the source method things, is you know your field and you know the things you have down and you document it and ground it in that way. And it gives you confidence. It gives you understanding of things. It makes you can think on your feet. You need a certain degree of improvisational skill. And you can deal with a lot and build up a network to where you can don't have to reinvent the wheel. The hardest thing to do in going after a creationist or anybody with an ideology that you're going after, an anti-vaxxer or whatever, is to have to research the whole bloody thing from scratch. Now, you want to find ways of gaining access to blocks of data field. It doesn't mean you're not doing research, and it doesn't mean you're not keeping track of material, but you're not having to come up with everything all on your own, in the same way that it saved you Jackson time when you didn't have to go traipsing down to try to find that stupid proto-Avis paper from Nature from 40 years ago.
Right.
Now, it speeds up the process. And I know for a fact from the amount of material that I do in my TIP project, it is physically impossible to keep track of everything. So the more methods you can use to create tripwire connections so that you can find the information you need relatively quickly from people and then confirm it, use that sound method. You don't ever have to take anything anybody says on faith. That's the last thing. And I don't think anybody should do that with me. That's why I put the sources in. Don't take my word for it. If you think I'm bullshitting, read the paper yourself. Take a look at it. And if you can find that I'm misrepresenting the thing, then fine and dandy, let me know. But I haven't had too many people go that route on there because we're careful. And you have to be very, very precise about how you deal with stuff. So we're slightly past the thing here. Lisa for Truth says, I used to be YEC, so I know their arguments. That's another factor, is that most of the people who will be anti-creationists were ex-creationists, because most people have been raised in an environment where that was the paradigm. And so I'm more atypical of somebody that comes from a completely secular background to where I've come in kind of from the back door, and I don't have that personal direct reflection of it. But Erica and Dapper Dino and all these others are ones that have known from their own personal experience what it was like to have the arguments, and therefore know how you can say when somebody says, well, you weren't really a Christian or you didn't really believe that. Oh, yes, they did. And they know what it felt like and how the arguments were being used. So here we are. We're slightly past the hour. I'm melting in, yipes, still 98 degrees. And I have the lights off. That's why it's slightly darker in here. And we'll eventually be losing the light on. I got to go put some water on the yard to keep the plants and the lawn from going. And you can't do that until the sun goes down or starts to go down. Otherwise, you're just burning the stuff from the water vaporizing and all that. So anyway, any last minute comments, Monsieur J?
Be safe and have fun, everybody.
That's good for everybody. The be safe part, and I would contend you can't really have genuine fun if you're not being safe. And you also, if you're being a nuisance, that's another thing. Even if you're having fun, but if you're being a nuisance at it, that's something else to consider. Don't be a nuisance. So
I agree.
Everybody, till next week, keep up on everything. If you haven't been vaccinated, or if you know people who haven't, try to get them to do it, because they're giving these things away. They're easily accessible. Probably every state of the union will have websites and things that you can go on and make appointments and find out where the things are and all of that. And the Walmarts, I got mine up at Walmart, the Johnson & Johnson. And so they're readily accessible, and there's no excuse. And we want to get out of this pandemic mode, and we can't do that completely, or at least regionally, if you've got a bunch of stupid people who are acting like it's 1820 and haven't quite got the memo on how viruses work. So everybody stay safe. Don't accept any wooden penguins, and we will see you next week. And ending stream.